thanks for coming, you guys. I know it's a long day, and I'll try to break a little bit early and just give you a high overview of what we do at Quantum. Give you a little background. I came from CBS television. Before that, I had a few decades in the effects world, being an engineer and building pipelines, running Flame and Inferno. And so that's my background. Ran a big digital intermediate facility for CBS, scanning old television shows and remonetizing them, like I Love Lucy and Bonanza, Gunsmoke, that sort of thing. So I've been on your side of the field, and I know how it feels when you're direct attached and kind of sneaker netting data back and forth. How many here of you are direct attached and working in disparate pools of storage on your machines and not working out of collaborative? So pretty much a decent amount of you. So essentially the high overview of what we do is we build systems that give you the ability to play in any format you want at any resolution you want. It just really depends on how much capital you want to throw at the problem that you have. But essentially we do it very well, and we can scale really, really well. So, and not expensively either. The reality is that you're going to have to ingest the 4K, the 8K, the 6K, the HD, and even the standard def someplace. So you're ingesting, and then you're going to analyze and work, and then you're going to have to deliver. And once you deliver, then essentially you're like, okay, what do we do with this? Now you're going to want to archive it and maybe remonetize that information on another project, whether it's a background plate or whether it's actual footage that you need to remonetize because the customers come back. So we really excel at doing that. And the life cycle of the data is really what's important. So, and how we do that is sometimes a little bit daunting because people say, oh, well, it's a SAN and we need fiber channel. It's really not that daunting. When I first started, I thought the same thing. Yeah, no worries. So essentially, the fact of the matter is it's no more daunting than running 10 gig or 40 gig or 100 gig IP. It's still the same kind of disparate set of networks that provide you with a standard, and that service standard is fiber channel. So essentially what we do is build you systems that you can attach all the machines into, and now with your MAM you can ingest and start to analyze and start to segregate your data and put it into places where you can utilize it from all of the different machines at the same time. So now the return on investment isn't so much just the capital that you're putting out and the ease at which you can get at it. It's really capitalizing on not breaking that creative flow and that stream of, wow, I really like to get that other data in here, but now I got to go hook up another, FireWire drive or whatever it is, wherever your data is coming into, and wait to import it, and then go back. And now you're like, okay, where was I? I got to do this thing. And sometimes you have multiple editors working on the same projects in different places. So you can't do that with disparate storage. It just doesn't work. Those islands of storage are the things that are going to prevent you from being able to push more data through the same pipeline. And that's really the return on investment. Your revenue stream is greatly increased by the simplicity at which you can get at that data, manipulate the data, and get it to the customer, and then get it to archive. So that's essentially what we do at a really high overview. And I'd like to ask you guys questions about what you're experiencing and what you're using. So if you do come to us, we can have a more in-depth discussion and go into the weeds technically. Because right now, the last thing I want to do is make you glassy-eyed and slack-jaw with all of the megabytes per second and IOPS. And you guys, I've probably been in here and want to get out and have some food. But I also want to be able to hopefully get across what we do and engage in a more in-depth conversation at a point where it makes sense to you. So what are you guys using right now? Is it Final Cut Pro? Is it everything across the gamut of the NLEs? So who's using Final Cut? Final Cut 10. Who's using Premiere? So wow. Anybody using any of the Autodesk, Flame, Inferno, Flare? So are you on a direct attached or are you on a collaborative storage?
I mean, at home I'm Just using home office, just using Smoke and Final Cut X, but then I go to facilities and everything is across a network, but they have standalone storage. They're not usually, most places don't have a SAN, like maybe one or two that I used to pay for at.
Yeah, so it can be daunting, and you're bringing in DPX frames, you're bringing in Red Raw, you're bringing in Alexa data, you're bringing in all the data that's very difficult to work with in its raw format. As soon as you convert it over and you've run it through a codec, and now you're putting it out to 422, is it HD cam or H264, H265? Who's working in 4K and above? And how are you guys doing that? Yeah. So what we do with our storage, you don't have to work in proxy. So if you're working with 4K data, and now all of a sudden you want to do pan and scan because you're going to actually, the delivery format is HD 1920 1080. You can do that. Now you can cut out the parts that you want and utilize that. Right now, how are you going to do that in proxy with any real? I mean, it's difficult. Yeah. Who's got 3D effects? Anybody? Nobody's got 3D effects in house, so it's all editing. All right. Do you guys have any questions?
What kind of machines are we talking about? Are we talking about RAIDs, like fast storage SANs?
Okay, so the hardware, it's a combination. So essentially, SAN is comprised of two metadata controllers, and they're in an HA situation, so one can fail over to the other if one dies. You don't want to have a single point of failure. And then there's a metadata array that keeps track of all of the location of the files and that file's attributes. So it's who made it, how big it is, what it is, and where it lives on the actual storage arrays. The storage arrays, we can work with pretty much most arrays that are available on the market today. And it's all connected through fiber channel. The thing that is required on the connectivity side is that you have fiber channel connectivity and metadata connectivity. One's running over fiber channel, one's running over Ethernet. And the topology seems complicated. It's not. It's very simple. And if you have small facilities, it's very easy to set up in terms of running the fiber and running the cable. It's a no-brainer. Larger facilities sometimes require a little bit more architecture and different situations where you're going through patch bays and that type of scenario. So it's really about setting up, and we have different sized setups. So we have a Pro Foundation solution, which is an all-in-one box. So you still have the different elements of hardware, but it basically is in one very small form factor that can fit in a half rack unit and provide you with all the same bandwidth. So those are the types of things that we bring to the table, and we can scale from the boutique size 2-person setup to enterprise. We've got over 100,000 installations. Fox, Disney, Deluxe, name a post house that's fairly large. Yeah. So those are the types of, and we don't just focus on the large guys, because the large guys are great, but it's also everybody else that's in the creative media and entertainment industry that really makes it happen, and that's you guys out there. So, and I'd love to spend some time with you to find out what do you guys need and how can we help you? Because some point, while you're doing what you're doing now, if you've got multiple editors in the room and you guys are working on 4K and 6K, at some point it's just it's a showstopper. Yes.
So is it MAM agnostic, and then also how does it work for media managing for like an offsite edit, taking your MacBook out of town and working on the piece?
Oh, that's great. It's great you asked. Now, we are probably one of the vendors that has the largest number of MAM integrations with our API. So whether it's CatDV or Telestream or some MAM that's going to help you, there are MAMs that specialize in that kind of environment where, like, we just did a project with UFC. So they shoot all around the country, all around the world. And when those shoots go on, they log in, they get to the MAM, they can upload their data to a central location, and it's all kept there. It's like a big silo, but it's remote. Now, that's also like a news broadcasting corp style topology. So yeah, we can absolutely handle that. Do you have a MAM that you're working with that you're?
Well, we've been looking at CatDV, a place I was contracting with recently, but they were on Keyflow, and they liked it, but they had some issues with it. Like, you could only edit your tags off of a single station, and then that would flood out to all the other users. Personally, my own freelance editing, I don't use one. I'm on a Pegasus 2.
Okay. So again, if you're a single editor and you have a way of dealing with your data, that's great. But when you start to get into multi-editor environments with thousands of cuts and thousands of feet of footage coming in from multiple cameras, you have to have some way of organizing. You have to have some way of cataloging it and keeping it in a place where it's trackable. So that's the key sense of this is those are the jobs that MAMs do, and believe me, they're worth their weight in gold when you get to that multicam setup. And even if you're a 5 or a 3 or a 2-person setup, and you've got a production company that comes back to you and they've got, well, here's all the cards, or here's all the data on this drive. You have to know which camera it came from, when it was shot, what date, all of the particular metadata for those shoots. And that's where a MAM really excels. And we work with pretty much most every MAM out there right now.
Could you break down the workflow as far as if you have multi editors? How would you categorize that within the editor so that everyone can share off?
Okay. Typically, from what I saw when I was the engineer at CBS, that's what we did. Our project, when I left, was the restoration of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and it wasn't a huge multicam operation, but in any episode, you could have had maybe 3 or 4 cams on one shot. And the way it typically is done, the way I've seen it, is that you have a folder, which is the project, and underneath the folder you'll have assets. And underneath those assets, in the same tree, you'll have the dates, and then on those dates, you'll have A camera, B camera, C camera, whatever camera that they designate, and under there is all of the different shots. So it really comes down to how do you want to organize your data? What's specific to your particular workflow? But that's typically how it's done. It's done by asset, and it's done by date, and done by camera. And then what happens is you have 5 machines. They're all going to see that folder structure. Nothing is going to be changed. They're all looking at the same folder structure. So you can have a guy working on, the last day of January, and you can have 2 guys working on the first day of February. Or you can have them working simultaneously on the same projects. So it allows you to really divide and conquer. You can multitask on at a multiple level structure. Anybody else?
Hello. I'm currently cutting a feature in Final Cut X, and they're shooting on Epic Red Dragons, so everything is 5K. And they're going to do a 2K when they're done and everything, but you touched on archiving, and in our sense, we're just going to do LTO at the end and then just put it on a shelf. Does Quantel offer, because it's like 21 terabytes of data, basically, and my rate is almost maxed out of at 24, and so it's like the movie's pushing almost past what I have. When we go to archive, does Quantel offer other solutions, or is LTO still just like the best way to go? Or
okay, so
there's not even anything you do? Like you touched on archiving, so I wasn't sure.
No, and that's actually one of our bigger part of our story. We have a long steeped history in LTO, and we now have new products, which are the cloud, which is through Amazon. We have object storage, which is based on erasure code, which is a technology that was developed for the space program for communications between the satellites and the men going out of our atmosphere. It's based on a non-failure. You know a component's going to fail, but you don't want the communication to fail. So in your particular case, yeah, absolutely. We can write to LTO. With storage, we have a product called Storage Manager. It's a policy-based action software so that you can set policies like, okay, I want this folder on this date to go to LTO, or anything over this age goes to LTO, and it keeps track of it. And it would go to typically a tape library, which is a small robot, and you can have it so that you can vault off. Like, say your robot's only 28 slots and you only have 28 tapes, but you know it's going to take 100 tapes. The vaulting allows you to write to those tapes, keep it in the database, that's storage manager, and take those tapes that are full and pull them out and put them on a shelf so that you can constantly grow that vault and not have to scale your library to have that number of tapes. So if you're a small operation, it really makes a lot of sense to do. We basically, right now we support the LTFS and ANT, and then we go up to LTO 7. That's our latest release. You can put a lot of data on those tapes, a lot of data. So I would highly recommend, if you guys are doing that, come and take a look at us. I'm going to be happy to sit with you and figure out how you can achieve what you need to do.
You're cutting at home on your own rate? How are you guys planning to go to LTO right now?
We're not sure. That's why, I don't even have an LTO like machine or anything. So we just know that the data's got to go somewhere when we're done and stay on line for teams stuff.
Yeah, and it's good to know that if you do that, maybe the client needs the delivery format in LTO, or is it going to be an upload via a Spera or a secure net that gets it there? Or are you going to deliver it on a drive? Yeah, so those are things definitely to have on your checkbox. Like when I was at CBS, we had the opportunity to work on a Marvel project, and we had to jump through a series of security audits to make sure that we could handle their data. And it was really, really complicated. But once we were done, the form of delivery was either an encrypted drive or it was going through an upload process that was completely encrypted, which was Aspera. So those are other things that can be built into the MAM and can be built into the storage manager process.
So sorry to drag Charlie into this if he's in the room, but he mentioned that I think they're just using a Mac Mini with attached storage and sharing over Ethernet.
Okay.
So at what point should a facility really consider, I mean, if it's working for them, where's the crossover where the capital investment in 2 metadata controllers and additional storage and all that stuff actually makes sense?
It actually makes sense when you're going to have multiple editors run more than one. If it's 2 and you've got to crank through a volume of data that's so large that now you have to load it on, because the real mechanism or the real decision process is, what is the delivery date? How much data do we have to go through? And how are we going to do that? So even if you have a Thunderbolt promise array that's sitting there, it's only going to transfer that data so fast. And to get it between 2 machines means you got to put it on that machine, unplug the Thunderbolt, and then plug it into the next machine. So it still takes the time to do that. And what if you're working with 3 people or 4 people? Now you're really causing a lot of work stoppage to do that. It's not hugely invasive, but it can be. And it becomes also a point of failure. What happens when that little RAID goes down and now, okay, maybe it's just one drive in that RAID 5 stripe, but now you've got to get a backup drive. And while that backup drive you're waiting for it to arrive, that RAID stripe is in a vulnerable state. So if you lose another drive, you're done. So it's very important to also look at the security of what you're working with. So it depends on what your timelines are and how much data you have to push and what's the size of that data. And we can work with Mac Minis. We can work with the Mac OS. That's the beautiful thing. For us, if you have the latest Mac OS, Xsan is built into the actual operating system. When we configure it, it doesn't chew up a license going back to the metadata controller, and it just sees the volumes. You're like, okay, I want to zone it. Boom, you're done. There it is. There's the data. Anybody else? You guys are starting to look a little slack-eyed.
Bueller.
Bueller.
Can we get a round of applause for Nils real quick?